breaking news and stimulating talk. AM 1420, WBSM.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with Stephanie Burke, science advisor Matt Moniz, and the silent assassin Matt Costa, broadcasting live on WBSM and on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com, which every week we broadcast live on Spooky TV, so you can watch what's going on in the studio, and you can also chat live with us on Twitter using the hashtag SpookyLive. It'll show up right there on Spooky TV, and also you can call in to us as well, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. And coming up in a bit, we will open it up for questions with Dave and John, our guests, John Tenney and David Rountree. They are part of the new program Ghost Stalkers, which debuts October 19th on Destination America at 10 p.m. But if you are in the New York City area, or if you can get to the New York City area before Monday night, the big premiere will be happening at the Bowery Hotel. Tickets are still available by going to Eventbrite, EVENTBRITE.com, and searching for Ghost Stalkers. And you'll be able to, and you can also go to the Destination America website, by the way, destinationamerica.com, and get your tickets there. But again, I have to reiterate, just signing up and getting a ticket doesn't guarantee you a seat. You have to be there, and you have to be one of the people to get involved, because it is kind of a first-come, first-serve thing, even if you've already put in for your tickets. So don't waste any time. I'm going to be hitting New York City. I cannot wait to get down there and to actually meet John and Dave and Chad and Nick and everybody after just talking to everybody over the phone and via emails for months now. It'll be great to all finally get in the same room and hang out for a while. Because I know you guys have all had the chance to hang out, but I'm kind of in the dark here with some of the in-jokes a little bit. Although Nick let me in on the Buffalo Bill stuff.
Oh, there you go. That's all you really need to know.
Right. So, I will not be putting any lotion in the basket. So,
you might have to dance a little bit, though.
I have no problem with that. And that will be a paranormal reality show all unto itself, watching me dance. So, let's take a step back here, because as we were saying, you guys had both had a lot of experience. I know that, John, you've been doing this for almost 30 years, and Dave pretty much just as long. And again, we're talking about something that had to be a pretty unique situation, speaking television-wise, in order to get you to be involved. When you first heard the concept of what Ghost Stalkers was going to be, was there kind of in the back of your mind a little bit of, okay, this sounds great, we have paranormal people that feel this way, but John, you've had a lot of experience with networks. Did you think that a network would buy into the same type of approach?
Oh, yeah, there's always worry in the back of your mind that this sounds great at first. I mean, it's just like a romance, you love at first sight, but then you get to know the person, you're like, oh, this is a disaster. Fortunately, this show just keeps providing more and more opportunities that I would never have thought a network would allow. I mean, to have people on television and allow them to really experiment and really talk about their psychology, internalize and talk and show that on television. I mean, it really is mind-blowing to me, and I just can't wait until people see genuineness. We've had reality shows now for 20 some odd years, paranormal or otherwise, and I think it's really interesting to watch a reality show where you watch people internalize the fact that, we'll probably touch on it later, the fact that Chad investigate alone, he goes in for one night by himself, I go in for one night by myself. Whether or not the location is haunted or evidence is captured, you watch a person, a human being, alone in the dark, for hours at a time, and you can't help but speculate on your own mortality and on the nature of life and existence. And you get to see transformative experiences happen to both Chad on camera. And I think that that's just a really intense and powerful thing for people to witness.
And that was almost something that, as being someone who watched a lot of these paranormal shows, I didn't watch as much of them in the last few years, but when they first started coming out, I paid attention to them. And it seems like they all go through the process of, taking the viewer along for the ride of experiencing the paranormal phenomena, but you're not spending enough of the viewing time watching the experience of the person, if you get what I'm saying. You'll see some of these investigators go in, and you see them almost as being an avatar for the audience, and almost like just a way for the audience to connect with the activity that's happening. But with this, it's more about watching the transformation, and just the stuff that I've seen, seeing the transformation of Chad from one location to the other, and seeing him become more confident and more sure of himself as an investigator. It's just been amazing to watch.
Absolutely. And, the thing that's great, and it's just, a minor aspect. There's so many different aspects that are different about this show. Since Chad and I are doing all of the camera work for our filming, for our investigations, most paranormal reality shows, the camera is spent with the camera pointed at the person doing the investigation. Mm-hmm. Well, since Chad and I have to carry our cameras around, and the only way we can see is through the viewfinder on the night vision on the camera, you do see us on camera. We have to turn and sometimes talk to the camera, because it gives me, and it gives Chad too, a sense that we're not alone. But the majority of what you're seeing from our perspective, because we're carrying cameras around, looking through the viewfinder of the camera. And that's, you don't see that on a lot of television shows. Now, the camera is mostly pointed at the investigator. So if something happens, it happens off camera. By the time they turn the camera around, you've missed it. So it's just one more aspect of this show that is really setting itself apart from the other ones.
And Dave, what about yourself in watching? Obviously you knew John already. Chad, I'm sure that you were just getting involved in the program. For you, is it satisfying for yourself as the person who's coming up with a lot of this cutting edge technology for them to use, to see their reaction to what you're setting up for them and what you're introducing to them at a certain location?
This show is about personal journeys, and it really it's using the paranormal in a way as the backdrop of it, but it's about two people who are dealing with things in their lives through this environment, and it's triggering things in both of them psychologically that are really eye-opening. It's eye-opening for us involved. It's eye-opening for the people watching it at home. And I think that aspect of the show, this show is very Onion-like in the fact that it's very multi-layered. There's so many things that are going on that are just a byproduct of the process, what we're doing. And I think that's what's going to make it unique, is the fact that you're watching two people, one a seasoned veteran, the other one a newbie, if you will, coming into it, and how these things are impacting them personally. It's not an analytical show in the fact that people are just offhandedly discussing something. People are experiencing things and reacting to those experiences. And I think that's one of the main parts of the entertainment value of the show, is that you're watching people processing information as it's happening.
And we're seeing, too, the bigger picture is never that far out of everybody's mind. It's always, great, it's happening, but now immediately, what does it mean? How can we put this into some kind of a perspective? And I think part of that is that, John, yourself, and Chad, you've had some pretty unique experiences in your lives in your younger days that have probably put you, if you believe in the idea of these other worlds, which a lot of folks do, these other realms, the experiences that you've had have put you guys closer to that, which, of course, being your... do you call it a death experience? Is that how you actually describe it?
Yeah, when it's discussed, I belong to different groups like the International Association for Near-Death Studies, but yeah, I had a cardiac arrest, and I flatlined for a total of 2.5 minutes, and actually, that's right at the breaking point too. When you start going to 3 minutes and 4 minutes, then you're talking brain death, and you don't really ever recover, even if they get you back. And Chad, with his experience with getting sick with Rye syndrome when he was a child, when you're a child, you might begin to form ideas about mortality through watching your goldfish die or going to a grandparent's funeral or, God forbid, a parent's funeral. But when you're 6 or 7 years old and you're told, that you're going to die, that fundamentally changes how you perceive and understand the world. And that's where Chad came from. And my experience when I died was, I hear people talk, when they talk religiously, they speak about being born again. I was transformed into a different person. After my heart restarted, the John that opened his eyes after they were closed was a different John. And, that's a really unique thing, too, when you're alone in a place that has a storied history where horrible, terrible things have happened in it or tragic events have unfolded. Again, it goes back to, you find yourself watching what Chad and I do, and we're in the dark and we're alone, and we know that we're mortal, and we understand the prospect of the very, very wispy strings that tether us to this living realm that we think we're experiencing. And, to watch that happen is very satisfying. But the other part of this show that's so amazing is, if people will see in the first episode, David brings in a piece of equipment because we want to see if the environment is right for some type of paranormal occurrence to happen. And you see it happen on camera. His device works perfectly, and just the genuine awe that goes on between us when you see that happen is just an amazing thing.
And Dave, do you feel like when you were bringing this equipment in and knowing the background that these guys have, in your mind, scientifically, does it make a difference to be able to give it to people who have been through experiences like that? Do you feel like they're already closer to being at this thinning of the veil, and you can just hand them this equipment and have it work even better because of the people who are utilizing it?
I think it's probably one of the most rewarding things I've been involved in my life, and I don't say that lightly. The fact that we all have the relationship that we have with one another, and the fact that I'm bringing something to the table that, the people out there haven't seen. I mean, a few have, but now a lot of people will be able to see what we're really doing, what we're really looking at. We're looking at emerging information. And to be able to document that emerging information and show it is awe-inspiring to me, because I've been doing this work for the last 8 years, specifically this line of research. So I know enough about what's going on that I can make predictions about what we should have if we have activity. And those predictions come true oh too well. I mean, more so than I've had experience up to this point. So I have to say that it's been rewarding in that aspect, in both the research aspect, and it's been rewarding in the social aspect, in the fact that I'm watching my friends be exposed to this phenomena, and not only being able to record it and show them what it looks like, but to watch their reactions when they see what they're dealing with.
It is. It's amazing to know that when everything can come together like that, it plays into the activity really being able to be amped up. And a lot of the shows that are out there have said, okay, well, we're going to go to this place and we're going to see if the reports of paranormal activity are true. And if we can document that and catch that for ourselves and for our viewers. And with Ghost Stalkers, the approach is different. You're going to places where you're saying, okay, we know that there's activity in these places. We've heard the stories about these places. And granted, the first episodes that you'll see are all places that you've never seen on television before. So there's that aspect of it too. But you're able to advance the conversation further by saying, we know that this place is haunted. We know that there are spirits here, activity here. Now let's see what it all means. And it's got to be the difference between, I can kind of liken it, John, between the difference between going to, elementary school and going to college in terms of the rewardingness of the education, the reward of the education that you're getting as a result of it.
Absolutely. And, we have to, the other thing with the elevating the level of discourse
Attention
in this
homeowners.
field, loosely knit field, we also have to get to a point, which Ghost Stalkers does. People want to understand what's going on. They want answers to all of this stuff. And you have to reach a point where you have to start talking about maybe there are questions that we can answer, and maybe there are questions that we are biologically or physically not able to answer. I mean, we may be at a point in our own spiritual, personal, biological evolution where we're being confronted with things that we can't yet explain due to our own personal limitations. And I feel like you can go to locations, and shows have gone into locations over and over ad nauseum and said, okay, this is haunted, that's a ghost. Okay, this is haunted, that's a ghost. Okay, this is haunted, that's a ghost. This is an opportunity that we're taking on Ghost Stalkers to say, okay, we know exactly what you said, Tim. We know this place has, allegations of being haunted, but we don't want to pigeonhole it. We don't want to call it something that we don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go there. Let's experience it. Let's show people those experiences. And then let's have a larger, broader, more informed discussion about this very weird reality that we live in.
And one thing that I'll say in terms of the natural reaction that you have to it that I've noticed in some of the footage that I've seen, and I don't know what it'll be like when it's presented for air, but I've noticed that they take a very raw reaction, especially from Chad. He drops a few verbal bombs there that have to be bleeped out. So this is not the run-of-the-mill stuff that you guys are always hearing when you're going out on investigations, when you're going to these locations. You're hearing stuff that, is really probably piquing your interest as investigators.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because on a lot of paranormal shows, again, you have this added bonus with our show, with Ghost Stalkers, with the fact that we're in these locations by ourselves. If people watch an episode of Ghost Stalkers and there's a strange anomalous sound that occurs while Chad is investigating or while I'm investigating, there is no other person in the building. Every other show, there's a camera crew somewhere, there's two other people in the building. So things are being knocked around, voices are carrying through heat ducts. There can be solvable answers to these things, very easily and quickly rectifiable situations, because the building isn't empty. When Chad and I go in and we're alone and a voice is heard audibly and caught on tape, or footsteps are caught audibly and recorded on video, that stuff happens and there's no one in the building. So, I mean, you have this added level of knowing that there's no tomfoolery going on.
And Dave, for yourself, I mean, going into these locations with these guys, checking them out, helping them set up the experimentation, and being a seasoned investigator for a number of years, what was your thought when you found out they were going to be locked in? Well, not locked in there, but they were going to be placed in there alone by themselves, with really only just a button and a camera that they can't two-way connect with as their only means of communicating?
Well, because they're my friends, I had concern.
I can imagine.
Going into a location solo is not a recommended activity. So for a variety of reasons, safety being one of them. And we were all very, very conscious of safety. And I want to get back to one thing you were talking about, bleeped explicitives. Yes. I think as the season goes on, you're going to find we were all bleeped at certain aspects.
I love it. Because it's real. It's raw. I like it.
It is real. It is raw. I mean, I can tell you I had personal experiences that I can't even explain. And to me, that's what it's about. I think that's the exciting part of it. But, yeah, I mean, watching this unfold, and we had situations occur where there were just uncontrolled things, and there's drama. There's real drama. And the way it's portrayed is real. And we went through, we feel like we're a tighter brotherhood today than we were when it began. And it's because of what we went through in the process of bringing this to people's living room.
And it's really, when you get the chance to see it, folks, and when you get to see how everybody works together, it seems very organic. It seems very natural. And I think that's all because everybody's going into this without their mind made up, without the thought, especially yourselves, not necessarily being television people, and John, you've made no secret about this. You're not a cameraman first and foremost.
Not at all.
And Chad having more experience in filmmaking and all of that too, but at the same time, you're not going into this worrying about getting the shot. You're worrying about this going in there and having the experience, and I think that will help the viewers a lot of the times too feel like they're right alongside with you.
Absolutely. I'm also worried about if I'm falling through a floor or
Right.
if an old structure is going to collapse on me.
Listen, I've got a location that I want to bring you guys to at some point that I'm concerned about whether or not you should be going around by yourselves in the dark worrying about what's on the camera viewfinder in front of you, because there's all kinds of holes and places to fall over. But I would just love to see if the theories that we're putting forth on the show fit what I know is an extremely active and really just fascinating haunt. But we can get into all that some other. I'll talk to you guys about that Monday night. But is there when I know that some of the theories have been put out there? Of course, Destination America put out a press release and mentioned the idea of portals, that being something that we're actively searching for, places where there might be a doorway from one world into another. And before this started, I'll ask each of you, John, did you think that portals were something that existed and something that you'd been able to document before?
It's funny because one of the things that's always fascinated me, and I've talked about this at my lectures for almost 20 years now, which is if ghosts are real, if ghosts and spirits are real and human beings have the potential to become a ghost, then that means that every person who's ever lived has had the potential to become a ghost. And so far on this planet, we estimate that there's been about 100 billion people who have died. Now, let's say half of them turned into ghosts. That means there's 50 billion ghosts on this planet. If that's true, why are they only in certain locations? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that really fascinates me about these doorways and entryways. What is it? Is it environmental? Is it psychological? Are people somehow connected to how to transverse this reality with some other unknown dimension? Otherwise, every single place should be as haunted as every other single place.
And somebody like my co-host here, Stephanie Burke, who is a spirit medium, a psychic medium, she can see spirits, and you would see you'd see 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 behind me all at one time, right, instead of being able to just zero in on a few. So, I mean, it must be kind of the same way for you and your perception.
Yeah, depending on the location, or some people believe, oh, this place is haunted. It's only one person that's there. I've walked into places that have had a group of 10 just kind of hanging out in one room. So you don't know, and I find that part of the show absolutely fascinating. I really can't wait to watch.
And one of the things David can tell you too, one of the things that people experience through watching his experimentation and Chad and I investigate is that we do seem to show the human component to this. That human beings are a large part of this system that we're experiencing.
And a lot of folks out there who do paranormal investigating themselves and go out to locations and try to, I'll say, coax spirits to interact. Mm-hmm. They try and draw them out and try to get them to engage. They've been critical of some of the different approaches that we see on TV of, just shoving something in their face with blinking lights that they might not understand, or yelling at them, or banging on the wall saying, "Can you do this too?" and basically asking them to perform. And one of the first clips that I saw, and I know that you guys have talked about this, so I'm not really giving anything away, but one of the first things that I saw was Chad saying, "We come here out of love and respect." And I think that makes a huge difference, because that's an approach that I think a lot of folks, it's lost on. A lot of people are just trying to have the experience, and they're not trying to make that connection. And it seems like he's willing, and I'm sure John too yourself, that's something that you might forget going into haunted locations, that, ghosts were people too, to use a bumper sticker that's been way overused for years.
Yeah, it's funny because, Chad does that because he honestly is out of love and respect, and out of a deep desire to find answers to questions that he has about the nature of reality. And in the first episode, I have always had a problem with provoking. I don't go into bars and push people around I don't know because they'll beat me up. So I don't do the same when I investigate. But in the first episode, people will see a person who's familiar with the location at some point tells me, the only way that you're going to get a response is if you call something out. And I have difficulty doing it. I do it because if that's what the person who knows the location much better than I for years and years says needs to be done, I try my regular way, and if nothing works, then I go to the next part. But even my calling out of something, I think people will see that I'm not doing it aggressively. I'm saying, listen, I heard you like to be called out, so I'm calling you out. And I say it as calmly as that, because it really is about intent, I feel. Not how you're speaking the words, but what you're thinking as you say the words.
Mm-hmm. Dave, what's been your approach over the years in your investigation? How have you tried to begin interaction with spirit? Is it more just a matter of coming in there and bringing some of these devices that you've created and turning them on and seeing what happens? Or do you try to have that personal interconnection? Because at the same time, your spiritual side, I think, you have to have a good balance between the science and the spiritual.
Absolutely. And for the last 8 years, my research has been portal formation. I've developed a whole theory about it that I call the wormhole theory, that's basing this on the formation of Einstein-Rosen bridges and emerging information. And the show is allowing me to demonstrate the evidence of that, which is fantastic.
Oh, and it is amazing what you've created.
And my approach has been more from a scientific aspect, in that I know things being spiritual. My scientific approach has been to try to find proof of what I know. And that proof has not so much been in an interaction, because I try to remove the human element from it and then have controlled experiments with the human element to compare and correlate the differentials. And the thing that's so good about it is this stuff's happening around us all the time. And it's happening around us in a lot of different places. And because of the environment and what we are going through with our consciousness, we don't even register it. But it is going on around us all the time, and it's only in times when we concentrate on looking for it that we find it. And I think that's a key vital element here, is this is not anything that's paranormal. It's normal. We just don't understand it yet. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to understand this process that's normal and be able to define it in such a way that we can understand it and put it into perspective with the rest of normalcy that we know.
Absolutely. And, we've hinted at it a little bit here, and I've mentioned your spiritual side, but why don't you let the audience know exactly what we're talking about when we say that?
Well, I started in the field in 1976, and I also started in my spirituality in 1976. I got out of the military, and I was pretty lost. It was the Vietnam era. I went through a lot of personal things that were difficult to deal with, and I was wandering out west, and a medicine man came up to me, and I had been having dreams since I was very young from my grandfather, who was full-blooded Native, and he had been telling me things to try to teach me traditional lessons. And this old gentleman dressed up in regalia came up to me and started talking to me like he'd known me all my life, and that he had been talking to my grandfather, and that it was his job to teach me the way. And I ended up being trained in Native American medicine. And over the years, I've carried that, and there was a time period for about 19 years that, because of an incident that occurred that's the subject of my new book, I went away from that path. And it's only been relatively recently that I went back onto it and came to grips with it. So I've had a personal journey and a background of all this as well. But I think the important thing here is that we're bringing something genuine, and John's hit on this numerous times, and we are working very hard to keep it that way. It needs to be real, and people need to understand that even though you may be skeptical about things, these things exist, and it's our job to try to document that.
I love the fact that it seems like the path for everybody to come together on this started so many years ago, and it's almost like it was, predetermined. And I'm somebody Stephanie will vouch for. I never believe in that kind of stuff.
Right.
Until I said to her, off the air, I said, all that crapping on fate and destiny that I've done over the years, that this is kind of proof that it's meant to happen. And everything seems to be coming together.
I agree.
The key part about it, too, is that people are getting so amped up for the show, and it hasn't even debuted. Just seeing a little, 15-second clip on Destination America and hearing you guys coming on shows like this and talking about what's going on and knowing that it's going to be something different, I think people are ready for that, and they're ready to accept something that 10 years ago might have been just too much for them to be able to handle and to understand.
You know, let me just add something here. The community's educated itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time for TV to respect that. And maybe we're pioneers in that realm. You know, maybe John and Chad and I and Nick and the whole crew involved with this, we're pioneers in doing something different and presenting something. You know, we work very hard in our planning and our prepping, which of course you know personally.
Mm-hmm.
We take care in setting things up so that we do catch data. You know, because once it starts, there's no changing anything. I mean, we're going with it. And there's no cutting. There's no, wait, can you do that again? I mean,
Right.
it's like a constant flow, and you got to hang on for the ride. And because of that, you know, we take great care setting things up to start with so that we do catch things, and that we are able to present in a visual aspect as best as we can what we may encounter. And I think that attention to preparation and detail is what's going to be the driving force in the production values of the show.
Well, and I think that it's definitely key because you know I've been critical here on the show of some of the shows in the past, some of the TV shows that have come out, and the way that they've handled things. And to me, the question that I always hear from people in the field, and I'm sure that both of you have heard this question, is, you know, when are they going to make a paranormal show for the paranormal
Mhm.
community? Because it seems like everything is so simplistic, and you have to kind of explain to people, listen, TV isn't being made for one small segment of the population, it's being made for everybody. It has to be digested by the masses. But it
Well,
seems like, sorry, go ahead.
there's something for everybody in the show. And
But
that's the other key thing is that, yeah, we do point out things and present them to the specialists, so to speak, the paranormal community.
Mhm.
But the general viewer who has no clue about what goes on has plenty of grist for the mill.
but they're also being able to get caught up, and they're catching up, and they're starting to think the same way that the paranormal community does as well. So that's what makes it especially rewarding to say that, okay, not only can people who have been in the field appreciate what's going on, but now these people who their only experience is by watching it through the eyes of other investigators on TV, they can now say, all right, wait, I'm ready to advance this conversation as well. So it'll be fascinating for sure. Do you guys want to take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
All right. Well, if anybody would like to call in, the number is 508-996-0500 or 877-996-1420 if you'd like to call in toll free. Also, you can send questions through Twitter by hashtagging them Spooky Live or tweet us directly at SpookySC, and we'll be able to see those questions. But it seems like, you know, all the comments that have been coming through during the course of the discussion have been excitement for the fact that things are different and things are unique, and everybody coming together with no ego, no predisposition toward anything, and just willing to explore this topic the way that probably, you know, you guys probably got involved with from the very beginning, having an open mind and not going into it with any kind of preconceived notions. John, with yourself, with going out there and doing these lectures that you've been doing for all these years, what do you find is the hardest part to get the audience, the general public, to accept?
You know, the hardest thing for any of us, right, is I always tell people, like when I said earlier about, you know, I don't necessarily believe in anything. I think that it's really great for people to have ideas, which are flexible and malleable and can change over time. When you have a belief, you're really concreted to something that's going to become geriatric very quickly. And that's just as you grow as a person. And so, you know, getting people, when people say to me, I have a ghost in my house, you know, when I ask the question at the beginning of my lectures, how many people here believe in ghosts? You know, 200 people raise their hand, but each of those 200 people has their own definition of what a ghost is and their own belief in what a ghost is. And they're willing to, you know, stand by that belief because it is a belief until they become frustrated that no one understands what they're talking about. And so I implore people to have, you know, new ideas and be able to think freely. I heard earlier before you had me on the show, you mentioned the name Ghost Stalkers, which is actually the most criticism I've got on the show is why is it called that? And, you know, when we were trying to name the show and we were trying to come up with the show, I really wanted to work in the concept of a psychopomp, which is an old term that's not really used anymore, but it means anybody that helps transition between this world and the world of the dead is a psychopomp. So the Grim Reaper is a psychopomp, an angel is a psychopomp. But obviously you can't call a show Psychopomps. The audience will have no idea what you're talking about. And so we were just looking at the words, and, pomp means to walk, and psycho is mind or spirit. And so we started working on blends of that, death walkers and spirit walkers and ghost stalkers, though the word stalker is an old Germanic word that means to walk quietly. It was only in 1991 when the National Enquirer used it as a bad term, as someone who's a stalker who does something evil, that it has this implication that it has now. But the original traditional meaning is someone that walks through the forest quietly without disturbing the forest itself.
What's interesting about that too is Christopher Balzano, who was formerly the director. He was the what was his name? Content director here. It's sorry, Chris.
That's good.
But Chris Balzano, who worked on this show with us for a number of years, him and I had a lot of discussions off the air about different aspects of just the folklore and the mythology of what it is that paranormal investigators do, how it plays into all of that. And we've had numerous discussions about how are today's paranormal investigators just modern psychopomps? Are their jobs really just to be there to recognize, to pay tribute to, and to help move on these spirits? Not saying that you're going to conduct a ritual where you go out there and help a spirit literally move on, but just by acknowledging their presence and letting them know that someone still heard them, that allows them to make that transition. So it's very interesting that you bring up the idea of psychopomps. You're right, it would have made a very bad title for a TV show, but the T-shirts would have been awesome.
Yeah.
You can still make the T-shirts.
Right, that's true. But Psychopomp and Circumstance, that would have been a fantastic name for a TV show. But I think we do have a question here on the line, and if anybody would like to call in, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. You can also tweet us at SpookySC or use the hashtag SpookyLive or email us, spookycrew@SpookySouthcoast.com. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast with Dave and John. Do you have a question?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
This one's for Mr. Tenney. John, I was wondering, during his years of investigating, how many times has he run across shadow people, and what does he believe that they are?
Thanks for calling. Thanks for the question. It's good because, again, when you're dealing with entities that look like they're some sort of human form, I've encountered over the past 27 years now, probably a dozen or more what people would call shadow persons. And what's really strange is I'm from Detroit, and so I live in a very culturally rich environment. Dearborn is right next door, and they don't have ghosts; they have jinn, because it's a heavily Islamic population. We have a huge Polish community and a huge Romanian community. So when you talk about the boogeyman, you're actually talking about a nature spirit. So again, I think with shadow people, the encounters that I've had have been so various and different. To say that it's simply one thing would do it a disservice. I've talked to a number of people who believe that shadow people are shadow people because they refuse to go into that light, and they're actually standing in front of it, which is why you see a silhouetted form. And whether it's their own fear that's blocking that loving light into this reality, when you see a shadow person, it's because they're blocking this warm, well-wishing feeling, and so you get a feeling of negativity from them. But it's not necessarily that they're negative. I don't know if that helps to answer your question, but I think that just like every other experience we're having in the paranormal realm, shadow people are vast and differing in their personalities and in the way that they react to our reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. The investigations that I've had, you always find shadow people around other spirits, other human-like spirits. I've often wondered, to me, they seem more like a leech spirit. You have a lot more cases of them reported in places to where there's some kind of tragic event, such as the insane asylums, the abandoned hospitals, where there's always been some type of harsh tragedy. You have more reports of shadow people, and you get more evidence of shadow people in those places. At least that's what I've found. And to me, they seem more like a leech spirit, like they're almost like they're there to leech off of the torment that the other spirits have faced.
Well, it's very possible. I mean, that's a great concept, and you're absolutely right. They do seem to be mostly seen around places of tragedy. The question that I've asked myself numerous times is, are they a spirit or an entity that came to that location because of the tragedy, or are they much like a thought form or an egregore, and they're an actual entity that was created by the tragedy that happened in that location? Is that why they are kind of without personality and without actual, physical form? They just look kind of human. Is it possible that the tragedy that was in the minds of the people who were suffering dragged something into reality?
Very interesting. Well, thank you very much for the call, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question.
Take care. That's amazing to me, John, to think of it, because I've never thought of it that way. I've never thought of these shadow figures being kind of shadowed. Not, I've always thought it was the nature of the being that was causing them to be that way. And we've had experiences ourselves. Moniz and I chased one around the basement of Lizzie Borden's for the better part of an hour. Would stop and would mess with us and would wait for us to chase it again from room to room. But I've had other ones that have come up to me and I've actually interacted with and physically touched and physically had that connection with. So to think that it might not necessarily be some sort of dark or scary figure is it definitely will give me pause the next time I run into one, which seems to happen more often than not. I don't know what it is about me, but
it's interesting. I have a scientific theory about shadow people, which is completely objective about it, and it's the fact that I believe that human beings give off light. We give off light. Our DNA emits photons. And what if it's a life form based on anti-photonic emission, and they're literally absorbing light and not reflecting it?
No.
Because if you think about that, that's exactly what you see when you encounter one. There's no light. It's like zero light. And I will have to say, watch the show.
No, well, I know I definitely will be, and I'm sure the audience will be as well. John, one question that I want to ask you, and it works in regard into your work in the realm of conspiracies. I heard you recently on another show discussing conspiracies at length, and you mentioned that you were lucky enough to have a mentor, and that you started off studying conspiracies with a focus on political assassinations. And I actually started off doing the same thing when I was in college. And I'm wondering if Dr. Philip Melanson is a name that you ever came across during your studies.
What was the name? You kind of broke up there.
Dr. Philip Melanson?
I don't think so. It doesn't sound familiar to me.
Okay. He was here where we live in the south coast of Massachusetts. He was a professor at UMass Dartmouth that taught a course in political assassinations in America. So I remember getting involved, and that's how I first started reading Jim Mars and hearing him. And so it was such an honor to me when I finally got to have Jim Mars here on the program a couple of years ago, and we've become pretty close friends in the time since. And it just shows that there seems to be people who are very forward-thinking that have popped into our lives from time to time that have kind of kept us on the right path and asking the right questions. And I think that you guys have now with Ghost Stalkers, you have the opportunity to be in that same role for the audience, for the people who are watching this show, and realizing that it's not all about wearing a tight shirt and yelling at the ghosts, and it's not all about, it's not all about having matching T-shirts and driving a van with a logo on the side of it too.
But yeah, my mentor, who did start me kind of on this path, he was the first person who legitimately introduced me because we were studying history. Obviously, we're studying political assassinations of the 60s and 70s, and it was through Craig, my mentor, who led me to meet people like Jim Mars and Mark Lane and Gerald Posner and Edward J. Epstein and all these people who were, are giants in the conspiratorial field. But the thing that was instilled in me at an early age was, history is a fluid and dynamic, ever-changing thing, and it's written by the victors, and so there's always a multitude of ideas. And that's something that I've carried through into my research about the paranormal, is that this is a fluid and a dynamic field, and it is beautiful in its ever-changing quality. And that's really why I always stress to people that concept I was talking about earlier about keep having a multitude of ideas and not being so concreted to your belief system.
And Dave yourself, I mean, who was there somebody that actually you, of course, in the study of Native American medicine, we heard of kind of who started you on that path, but from a scientific side, was there someone or some experience that decided to have you apply, that had you apply um, that approach to finding answers to the paranormal questions?
Absolutely. I mean, I was blessed to be brought up in the time of giants. My contemporaries when I began this, the people I looked up to were people like, Hans Holzer, people like, J.B. Rhine and Elsa Rhine, and my mentor was Dr. William Roll, and he was probably the foremost expert on poltergeist activity in this country. And up until his last days, in fact, he was the first person to read Paranormal Technology after I wrote it. And he told me, he said, "You have a great book here." He says, "It's too bad I only understand a part of it." And that was probably the best compliment he could have ever given.
Yeah, wow. That's
And he was adamant about being objective. And if nothing else, he preached objectivity. And that has served me well over the years.
And I think that that's going to be something that will shine through for a lot of the folks who watch this show when it premieres October 19th on Destination America at 10 p.m. And again, anybody who can make it out to New York City Monday night, there's still the opportunity to get tickets through Eventbrite. Just search for Ghost Stalkers, and you'll be able to join us at the actual event in the Bowery Hotel. Have you? I know that you guys have done other television shows in the past. You've been involved with some in the past, but have you ever seen anything like this before, where they're going to put you in front of the media and in front of the crowd and the masses and say, and I know that, John, you already did this at Scarefest too, but to say, here are the guys and here's the show, and what do you think? Are you nervous at all for this Monday night?
I'm not. It's one of those things. As a sidebar to all of this, I grew up until the age of about 11 with a horrible speech impediment, with a huge stammer and a stutter. And I went to speech therapy and got through it and ended up lecturing for a living. Mm-hmm. So any opportunity that I have to be up in front of people, I take it and I cherish it and I love it.
Awesome. And cool. Dave, you're a personality, so I know that you have no problem working a room.
No, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now, and I enjoy the interaction. I enjoy being reachable and being, in contact with the people that are going to be watching, that are going to be seeing what we're presenting. Because I know when I go to something like this, I have a million questions, and when I question someone and they don't have time to talk to me or they don't have time to answer my question, I lose interest pretty quick in what they're doing. So I think it's really important that we do these type of things, that we actually make ourselves accessible to the public, because it allows them to realize that we're human beings and not just an icon on TV.
Absolutely. And of course, if there's somebody sitting down in the front row in a T-shirt that says Psycho Pomp heckling you, you'll know that that's me. What I think people are going to enjoy too about this, in watching what I've seen of the show, and I know in the reaction that people have had from Scarefest, is everything just comes across as genuine. Everything comes across as with the right intentions, and that's something that I think is going to hit home with the audience. And I know that as they see the different locations, you feel the same way with this program as we feel with our company Legend Trips, where we take people into haunted locations to raise money. The location is the star. The place is the focus. And it seems like that is what's going on with Ghost Stalkers. And it shows that, there is no ego involved in this. There is no theory to prove. It's more, let's see if the stuff that comes at us fits into the theory. And I think that that's new and different and refreshing in terms of presenting investigation to the public. So
let me add something to what you're saying there too, because one of our kind of unofficial side goals in this is that we want to preserve history. We want to help these locations to remain among us. And so a lot of what we do is we talk to the owners, and when we say, this will help you preserve it. It'll help you to keep it going if you utilize the tools that we're giving you. It will help preserve these buildings for future generations to be able to admire and to experience. So, we have, these altruistic goals, There are personal goals that we try to implant in the process as well. We want to save these locations. We want them to impact others like they impacted us. And I think that's kind of a cool thing that we all sort of just do organically as part of this project.
It was a moment that truly moved me in the research of the locations. John, there was one location that I know you had been to in the past that will appear in these episodes. And in talking with the owner of that building, a former school, in discussing that with her and feeling the passion that she has for maintaining the building, I felt like even if nothing else comes out of this, the fact that it's going to help this woman with this goal is going to be enough for me to walk away and say that made a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on it earlier when you were speaking about spirits and ghosts, and perhaps they just need acknowledgement and they just need to be remembered. And that's another layer of this show, is these locations, much like the stories that take place in them. The locations need to be remembered, and they need some attention, and they need to be looked at and remembered. What happened there? We have such a limited history in the United States. We're still such a young country, and especially I can tell you, coming from Detroit, it's very hard to do investigations in Detroit because as soon as a building is 60 years old, we tear it down and build another one. And Detroit's a perfect example of what happens when a city loses its history. You can't go to places and experience, the Model T plant where the very first Model T was built is in complete disrepair and being torn down right now. These are parts of a collective history that need to remain and be remembered. And I think that's one of the levels on Ghost Stalkers that we're doing with these locations.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us, and I look forward to hopefully in the future having each of you on individually so we can get really in depth with some of the topics that you both cover. Of course, Dave, the new book is called Demon Street USA, right?
Yes, sir.
And people can get it through Amazon and wherever else books are found?
Yeah, you can actually buy it off the shelf in Barnes & Noble stores.
Excellent. And it's available digitally, too, as well, right?
Yeah, all the digital formats are there and everything, so you can get it at your favorite supplier.
If I buy the digital version and I get to the last page and the story's over and I'm finished reading the book, is the last page going to be a portal that sucks me in?
Well, I'll have to tell you there are at least 4 sequels in the works to that book.
Wow. All right. Well, we look forward to talking with you about that for sure. And John, of course, keep us up to date with all of your lectures around the country. And we look forward to talking to you guys again, too, as well, before the next season, right? Come on. Let's get the positive
Absolutely.
momentum rolling. All right. Thank you, guys. I look forward to seeing you both Monday night.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for having us.
That is Dave Rountree and John Tenney, 2 of the stars of Ghost Stalkers, which will be premiering October 19th on Destination America at 10 p.m. And, of course, we'll keep reminding you about that in the weeks to come. We'll be back next week with our guest, the psychic lawyer, Mark Anthony. We'll take your calls as well for Mark, and I think he'll also be giving some readings as well. So we look forward to talking to you all next week. For Matt, for Stephanie, I'm Tim. We want you all to stay spooktacular.
For local news, talk, and sports, the South Coast turns to AM 1420 WBSM New Bedford and WBSM.com. From ABC.